Hello and welcome to the program. I am Mary Kanu. It has become a familiar scene these days in Africa. A few soldiers on state television announcing that they have taken over. This time, a fraudulent election is the excuse. Ali Bongo, the incumbent president of Gabon, had on Saturday been declared the winner of a highly criticized poll, one that journalists and reporters were allegedly barred from covering. In the early hours of Wednesday, military leaders announced they were cancelling the results of the election and dissolving all the institutions of the republic. The soldiers who announced the coup said they were from the Committee of Transition and the Restoration of Institutions and represent security and defense forces in the country. The coup leaders also announced that the country's borders had been closed until further notice and that Bongo would be replaced by the head of the Presidential Guard, General Brice Nguema. Although Nguema has denied any appointment, there is no doubt that having been in power since 1967, many had enough of the Bongo family dynasty. People have now taken to the streets, appearing to be genuinely delighted. So far, there's no sign of a pushback. Now, from Niger, now to Gabon, are we suddenly seeing a rise in coups in Africa? Is this now a norm? To answer the questions, global security analyst Ajay Boache joins me on the program. It's good to have you join me. Now, it's just been a month after the coup in Niger. What was your first reaction to the news of this coup? Do you think the military are now coming back in full force?
Thank you very much, Mary, for this opportunity, and good evening to the good people of Nigeria. Well, so first of all, I would like to say that I strongly condemn this, as to many others coup within the sub-region. We all know that within a couple of 2 to 3 years, there have been several coups reported by Africa, and the one has happened in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and so on. My first reaction would be that these soldiers, yes, there have been an intervention from them, but definitely they can't give or provide the necessary needs of the people. Food to me is not the solution to our problems as Africans. It has never been the solution, and it will never be. Returning back to democratic regime will be the best thing, but if to their analysis, organizing coup or staging a coup in the country will help them best. I will still condemn it. It's not the right way to go to solve this kind of issue. Arguably, there have been some destabilizations within the established regions, and also urge African leaders to relook within and find out what actually the problem is.
Well, you say the coup is not the right way to go, but the Gabon military leaders say their action was down to, in their words, irresponsible, unpredictable governance, in resulting in worsening social cohesion that risks leading the country into chaos. Is this reason not justifiable?
Well, everything that we say to them is justifiable because they are trying to make a case for the reason why they have staged the coup. Okay, Mary. We can all recall some of these countries which there have been incidents of coup. We can check their progress. Okay. Yes, or the main reason why, some of the reason why they stage a coup is their political instability. They think this is the time for them to end a regime, okay? A regime that started way back in 1967, 2009, 42 years of ruling or of overlording, plus the 14 years being done by Ali Bongo. They think this is the time to end that regime, and they are making a lot of claims to justify the reason why they are doing this coup. I think, pursuant to what they have already said, both in their country and the interviews they have granted so far to other media houses, I think that there is still no reason to stage a coup. If there is anything they can discuss with their government, solve it amicably, engage all stakeholders, engage some African leaders, and for purpose of education and to kill doubt. We all know that Gabon doesn't belong to ECOWAS because all of us have heard people calling on the head of ECOWAS to intervene. Gabon belongs to ECAS, as we all know, and it's finding itself in the central parts of Africa. So we'll urge ECAS members to intervene, engage these military leaders, and ask them to revert to a democratic regime. Because, as I stated earlier on, this thing shouldn't be a reason. Some have stated some of the reasons being poor economic management, hardship, misappropriation, and other stuffs, but they are still shouldn't be the reason why they should stage a coup. That would be my initial comment on that.
Okay, so the latest African countries, you know, where the army has in recent years seized control are all former French colonies. So what effects do you think these coups will have on the stability of the region?
Yes, as indicated earlier, these coups for recent times has happened in mostly Francophone countries. Per what we have observed, okay, they have always highlighted corruption, misappropriation of funds, unemployment, and including poverty as some of the reasons why they are staging this coup. Okay, yes. Looking at the sub-region and the way things are happening within the Francophone countries, this thing will scare investors. This thing won't help promote their economic activities, and it will affect the sub-region heavily. It will scare any foreign investor who is trying to come and invest, help curb their unemployment situation, and also affect their political, let me say, system. Their political and democratic system will be destabilized. Their reverting back to their democratic system will impose some confidence in the system for other foreign companies, even indigenous companies, investors, those who are interested in the development of the country, to return back and make things work. I think it's time for them to understand the issues at stake and also understand that staging a coup isn't the right way. As I said, the Star region is being destabilized. No one will be interested to come back to that country. Some of their people are being flee to different countries, become refugees, and so on in different countries, being manhandled in other sub-regional countries. And I think this time around, they should go back to the drawing board, arrange their things very well, and make sure that they bring their country back, get the good leaders, supervise elections, make sure that they go back to their democratic state, democratically elect leaders to lead them. This, as I said, will impose some confidence in the system. Currently, I can tell you, it's scary within the region. Things are not well, and it's high time we advise our juntas to return back to democratic state.
So how about Africa now as a region? How much do you think the continent has been set back by all of these coups?
The continent has been set back decades. Okay, decades. Because we all know that when a coup is being staged in a country, we all know the consequences. Okay, they heavily invest in guns and other materials to protect their territories. And this one destabilizes their economy, destabilizes their currency, it weakens their currency. Okay, looking at what happened in the likes of Rwanda, Libya, and so on. It's only Rwanda that has somehow reverted back, gone back, become a bit stable. Look at Libya and other countries. Okay, what's happened over there? So now their economy is not doing well. So now it has taken them back decades back, about 2-3 decades back to their olden days. And it's not helping them to grow. Okay, some countries or some war-torn countries or countries that have faced these coups are recording negative economic ratings. They are not performing well economically. They are not doing well in terms of job creation. They are not doing well in terms of social interventions to curb their hunger issues. They are not doing well with poverty alleviations. Poverty is one of the negative impacts of coup. It creates room for people to loot the system. It creates room for self-seeking people to also what make their way through the system. As I said, it is not always, and it will never be the solution to the problems Africans are facing.
Well, all right. Now, global security analyst Ajay Boache, thank you very much for your time and your contribution.
Thank you very much. And my last wish to the people of Cote d'Ivoire is that whatever they have said is true. The country needs to go back to the drawing board, re-strategize, and bounce back to a democratic state. We all believe that putting systems together, it will work for them.
Well, I believe you meant the people of Nigeria, not Cote d'Ivoire. Well, thank you all the same.
Sorry, the people of Gabon. Sorry.
Or Gabon, rather, the people of Gabon.
Yes, please.
Well, all right, Sal. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, so let's take a break now. But when we return, we'll be joined on the program by a foreign policy analyst. Stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. Now, the coups in Niger and now in Gabon have generated worry. Questions are being asked as to why this trend continues in Africa. To answer some of these questions, Adib Sani, security and foreign policy analyst, joins me now on the program. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, when we look at the number of years, the Bongo family has held on to power, we're talking 53 years. Is this enough to trigger citizens to ask for a change? So far, we know there has been no pushback from citizens. On the contrary, there have been celebrations. So would you say this was a trigger, for the coup to take place?
Well, I'm not surprised as a watcher of international politics, especially in Africa, that this has happened. I mean, some of us knew that it wasn't a matter of how, but a matter of when the Bongo dynasty would come to an end. There are some fundamental issues that we continue ignoring, and it creates that unique opportunity for the military to take over. When so-called democratically elected governments decide to manipulate the constitution to extend their rule, like it has happened in the case of the Bongos, and making it limitless for them to contest to be president, then it becomes a major problem. The opposition leader in the country was arrested, just as it has happened in Senegal with the arrest of Ousmane Sonko and the dissolution of the main opposition party. And there are other cross-cutting issues that are human security in nature. When you are sitting on vast wealth, oil, gold, bauxite, timber, cocoa, and the rest, yet a good chunk of your population live below the poverty line. A lot of the youth population, and we know Africa has a large youth population with a median age in Africa being about 19 years. When they are without jobs, when a bulk of your population lives below the poverty line, then it becomes a problem. As we speak, Nigeria has the largest number of people living below the poverty line in the world, even more than India, with over 100 million Nigerians being poor. The debt stock is rising. Ghana, according to the World Bank last year, had close to 1 million more Ghanaians becoming poor. So these are structural issues, and they are the fundamental issues that create the opportunity for the military to take over. So no wonder, anytime there is a military takeover, we have thousands of particularly young people coming out in their numbers to celebrate, like we witnessed in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and now, as it happens, in Gabon.
All right, you've said you were not surprised with the coup. It was going to happen, sooner rather than later. But there are claims that the election was flawed. So President Bongo's main opposition candidate, Albert Ossa, complained that many polling stations lacked ballot papers bearing his name, while some of the ballot papers had the names of candidates who had withdrawn from the election. So, given the alleged flawed election and President Bongo's decision to continue to retain power, is the military rule the way to go?
There is no justification whatsoever for a military takeover. Soldiers don't have a magic wand which they can use to change your fortunes overnight. They might be bereft of ideas. And so, in my opinion, there's no justification for the military to take over power. But there are fundamental issues that we cannot ignore, because there are some so-called democratically elected leaders who act more autocratically than even the military. And when it happens that way, they have no option. Either the military comes to take power, or the people come in the form of an uprising. Okay, so either way must be criticized. And I think this is where the AU, ECAS, ECOWAS, and the rest have to come in, because the African Union Charter on democracy, elections, and governance is quite specific about the fact that it's not only the military that engages in coup. There is constitutional coup d'etats in which politicians manipulate the constitution to extend their stay in power, one. Secondly, when they engage in electoral fraud, it is a constitutional coup, but nobody seems to be talking about it. In ECOWAS, there's a 1999 mechanism on conflict prevention, resolution, management, peacekeeping, and security, which is also quite specific about monitoring the democratic dispensation in individual countries to ensure they adhere to the principles of democracy as enshrined in ECOWAS. And there's also a protocol on good governance. Unfortunately, we don't seem to pay attention to all of these things happening. Adam Abaro has gone first, second, now he wants a third. Alassane Ouattara has gone first, second, third. Now he wants his brother to take over. Senegal, Macky Sall, he wanted a third, but the people said no way. Now the opposition leader has been arrested and his party has been disbanded. And this is what creates that recipe for disaster.
Okay, so you said you've called for the interference of the African Union, the AU, but we know that in Niger, ECOWAS has threatened and and has placed sanctions in the country. But this did not deter this another coup from taking place in Gabon. So what then would you say the African Union should do to end coups? Should there be like an AU standby force like what ECOWAS is planning, to counter further coups that might take place in Africa?
Well, that would amount to being reactive rather than proactive. We don't have to wait for the coups to happen. We have to take drastic measures, ensure that all the protocols, the articles, and the mechanisms are fully adhered to by member states. There is an early warning mechanism also. I don't know what has become of it, because I know in the past they were quite effective. One such example is when they were able to predict that the 2007 elections in Kenya could be violent, but we don't know what has become of it. So I think ECOWAS and other sub-regional, and of course the mother regional body, AU, should pay more attention to the issues of human rights, to the issues of water security, food security, health security, environmental security, social security, etc. We need to stop the situation where leaders engage in manipulation of constitutions. And because of ECOWAS's particularly inability to deal with this matter, a lot of people call them the president's club, because they seem to be representing the interest of the heads of states rather than the interest of ECOWAS citizens, which I think poses an existential threat.
All right. So, what then do you make, of or about African rulers, and presidents who like to hold on to power for so long? Do you think this gives rise to the coups that then set Africa back?
Well, coups is a major problem, but it's contagious. When it happens in one country, the probability of it happening in another country is quite high. And some of these issues are cross-cutting. And I remember some 2, 3 years ago when President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo was the ECOWAS chair, there was an extraordinary meeting at the Kempinski Hotel in Accra, in which I said to Al Jazeera that what has happened in Mali will not be the end. We are going to see more of it happening until we deal with the structural issues. And I can say also that what has happened in Gabon will not be the end. I mean, I have my eyes on some countries that are doing the same mistakes that has been committed by Gabon, Mali, and the rest. So we really need to pay attention to these fundamental issues if really we are committed to stopping these coups. And my major issue is terrorists taking advantage of what's going on, because since the junta took over in Niger, we've had 4 major attacks that resulted in thousands of Nigerian soldiers getting killed. Okay, it plays to their advantage because they love the confusion. It is in state of instability that they are able to carve an edge. They are able to reassert their dominance and influence, like it happened in Somalia after the overthrow of Siad Barre. Al-Shabaab filled the void. In the 1990s, when there was confusion in Sudan, Al-Qaeda came in. In the early 2000s, after the invasion, there was communal violence. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, led by Abu Musab al-Zakhawi, also, took over. So we need to really be careful so this doesn't exacerbate the already volatile security situation on the continent.
All right, let me ask you this final question before I let you go. We've seen that these countries where coups have taken place in the last years are, former French colonies. So how do you see this affecting the relationship between the colonial power and then the African nation where the coup has taken place?
Well, I think French foreign policy with respect to their former colonies in Africa is archaic. It has no place in today's geopolitics. They need to revise it. A lot of the information we are hearing is information and misinformation. Yet there are still some legitimate issues on the ground that really needs to be cleared. France obviously is losing its dominance, its influence on the continent, and I must say that is quite worrying, and it's a major foreign policy failure. That is why I insist it should be looked at. And I remember when Ibrahim Traore, the leader of Burkina Faso, went for the Africa-Russia summit, he said something I found profound, that it is time for Africa to reassess its strategic alliances. So in the past, maybe a particular country would rely on France, hook, line, and sinker because it's a former colony. Maybe the English speakers would rely on the UK and of course the US because of the language thing. But now countries are beginning to reassess wherever you would get help from, wherever you would go and your interest would be very well represented, they will not hesitate going there. Okay, that is why you see more investments by the Chinese, by the Russians, Iranians, Turkish in Africa, because Africans are now looking, towards the east, not entirely on the west, and that is exactly what we're seeing today. And the biggest culprit, I must say, in the midst of what is currently happening is France. And the possibility of Russia taking precedence as a result of what's happening is also high. So, it has become a very complicated work, of geopolitics that is playing out on the African soil. But what I do hope doesn't happen is the belligerence angle to it. We are seeing the economic bit of it, but when it becomes a war situation in which countries are fighting as proxies, then it becomes a problem.
Adib Sani, security and foreign policy analyst. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure always. Thank you.
Well, that's our program for today. Thank you very much for watching. I am Mary Kanu.